and then sharing the screen. Whoop. There we go. And Jack, you probably want to unmute yourself, and whenever you feel like starting, you start.
Thank you, Richard. Our opening hymn is Carolyn McDade's Spirit of Life. Feel free to sing along, but please stay muted. Well, that's a puzzle. Matthew, go full screen. I'm sorry, people, I can't fire the tech guy because he's the co-host. Matthew, you're where we're not hearing anything.
Or seeing anything. I mean, there's a static screen.
I couldn't hear what you said, Jack.
Nothing's happening.
Oh, crap. So, let's try this again. Sorry.
Yeah,
Is
you'll
that better?
have to rewind to the beginning.
I did. Sorry.
Sound is terrible. Matthew. We should forget it, and I'll sing it.
Sorry. I don't know why it's got the same problem Jack had earlier. This is sorry.
Yeah, take it down.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Richard, let me try sharing and see what happens.
Okay. This is why people hate Zoom meetings, you know.
Yeah.
This is also why people had talked about preferring live music.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey.
Good.
Rise in the sea.
Jack, you're muted.
Well, there we are. Good evening, and welcome to the regular third Wednesday Vesper service of the UU Multiracial Unity Action Council, called, for some unknown reason, UMIAC. We embrace all who come with the spirit of worship and invite you to remain after the service for conversation and refreshments. I'm Jack Reich.
Mhm.
And now for a few announcements. Friday, March 1st is our monthly board meeting, 3 p.m. Central Time, right, Richard? 3 p.m. Central Time.
Used to be, we moved it to 2 p.m. Central.
We made it 2 now. Okay. I didn't know if that was a permanent move or not. And don't forget the NAUA third Saturday worship service, March 16th at noon Central Time. And the NAUA, that's the North American Unitarian Association Ministers Support Group, meeting tomorrow, also at noon. See naunitarians.org for details. Our next Vesper service will be the third Wednesday, March 20th at 7 p.m. Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. Are there any more announcements?
And the preacher is Dr. Matthew Shear, and his sermon is called The Arsenal of Democracy. The Arsenal of Democracy.
Wonderful. Anybody have any more announcements? Okay. And now, as Richard kindles our chalice, may it symbolize for us the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. Time for our mission statement.
Mhm. It is the mission of the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council to carry out and foster anti-racist and multiracial unity activities, both within and outside the Unitarian Universalist Association, through education, bearing witness, and other actions, and expansion of our membership both within and outside the walls of our congregations. We also seek to defend our UU principles against those who seek to undermine them, and that latter group, unfortunately, includes most of the national UU officials today at the seminaries, in the UU Ministers Association, and at the UUA. And we're sorry to say that, but it seems to be the case. We envision congregations, denomination, and society as not being color blind, but color appreciative, as judging and treating members of the world's rank and file by the content of their character, not the color of their skin or their cultural heritage, and as treasuring diversity in the context of the beloved community. We call this vision multiracial Unitarian Universalism. This is the prize on which we try to keep our eyes. This is the goal. This is the mountaintop, the unity of the light and dark-skinned people of the world.
In the publicity for tonight's service, I announced that we would take turns sharing our predictions for the coming year, 2024. It can be quite interesting or a deadly bore. Which it will be is entirely up to you. Let's reflect for a minute on what a prediction is. Microsoft's new Copilot says, a prediction is a statement about a future event or future data. It can be an educated guess or estimation based on available information and data. Predictions often rely on past patterns, trends, and current conditions to forecast what might happen in the future. In simpler terms, it's like looking into a crystal ball and making an informed guess about what lies ahead. Well, that takes care of anyone who's never heard the term before. Yet perhaps there's more. I think of a prediction as a wish about the future. Not that you want your prediction necessarily to happen, but that if your take on reality is accurate, your prediction is a wish about what must happen. And in that sense, being consonant with reality, you wish for it. Otherwise, your view of reality is wrong. That's my point of view. Perhaps yours is different. I thought to share with you Ralph Waldo Emerson's view of prediction, since he was an eminent Unitarian preacher, but I couldn't find it. So let's have a minute of meditation, a musical interlude, and then the floor will be open for the sharing of the UU MUAC sharing of predictions for 2024. 1 minute now of meditation. Silent.
Jack, are you running that video?
No, it's silent.
Oh.
Yes.
for thousands. You can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us. Peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
What's the difference between a service animal?
So, at this point, can everybody hear me?
Mhm.
Good. This idea for a sermon of predictions was not mine, but that of the late Reverend Al Henriksen, former member of the UUA Board of Trustees, minister at the Rancho Palos Verdes Church, and a mentor to me, a new minister at the Unitarian Society, Los Angeles West. On my one Sunday off each month, I would often attend his church and drive Lawrence Peter, the famous author, a Canadian Unitarian and church member who did not like to. On the first Sunday of 1984, we sat in the back as Al did his annual predictions service. This was very popular with the congregation and saved him having to write a sermon. Larry was a very funny guy. You may remember that in his first bestseller, The Peter Principle, he proposed, in a hierarchy, every employee tends to rise to their level of incompetence. Work is accomplished by those employees who have not yet reached their level of incompetence. Think, for instance, of the current UUA board and administration. At any rate, he waited until Al said, "Let's have one more." And then he raised his arm. Al said, "Oh, there's Larry Peter. Larry, what's your prediction for 1984? And in his deep, booming bass voice, Lawrence said, "I predict that in the coming year, the cost of living is going to go up and the odds of living are going to go down."
Mm.
And thus ended the day's sermon, but not ours. It's now time for you to share your ideas about what's going to happen in 2024. Please remember that we have about 15 people. So if you take 2 minutes, that's a half an hour. And in no particular order, when you feel like speaking, unmute yourself and introduce yourself and have at it. Richard?
I'm taken by your equating or you're relating a prediction to a fervent wish for something that's actually possible. My fervent wish, my prediction is that Yulia Navalnaya, the wife of Navalny, who has already stepped forward to lead the movement that he led. My hope is that she succeeds.
Hi, everyone. This is Marie.
Go ahead, Marie.
Has anyone heard about Ghana giving a whole terminal to the US military?
No.
Well, I guess I have to fact check it. Because that's supposed to be what's happening in Africa, because 3 of the Francophone countries throughout France, and France supposedly ran to the United States, and the United States put pressure on Ghana, and Ghana gave United States a whole terminal for military.
Hmm.
But as I said, I haven't fact checked it. But I haven't seen it any place but on the particular podcast I saw it on. I haven't heard anybody talk about it. So as I said, I haven't fact checked it.
Thanks for the tip. We'll be on the lookout for it.
Okay.
Nancy Haldeman, you have your hand up, but you'll have to mute yourself. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. Yes,
Yes.
I jotted a bunch of things down here. So I think we're going to have a third-party candidate with no labels, and that's who I'm going to be voting for. Gender ideology, I think, will be exposed as a pseudoscience. I think many Democrats will vote independent. UUA is going to lose lots of members. Our local church is going to have budget pledge problems. More people will be leaving all of the churches. And I will find fun things to do, like travel in the US. I'll do a lot of music, and I will ignore politics. And I think the jet pig, if you don't know about this from the UUA, will make us the laughing stock of the United States. UUs will start to notice that there's something wrong, and ministers will start being fired for deceiving us for the last how many years. And NAUA will exceed over 1,000 members this next year. I think that's enough for right now.
Very good. Well, that's quite a list, Nancy. Thank you. David Wilcom, unmute yourself. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, so I'm going to keep my predictions within the UU issues. So I think that in the coming year, our fellowship down here will have more of an awareness of what's going on in the up in Boston. And one of the methods of doing that is I'm really going to promote having the GA and other things live streamed into our fellowship, where we watch it as a group and then can comment and share our observations. Thank you.
Very good. Yes, Valerie.
I'm active in local and national politics with the state organization. And I just predict whoever wins the presidential election, there is going to be chaos with accusations, hopefully not gunplay. I just don't see a happy ending.
Yes, thank you, Valerie. Well, that's a tough place to end. Richard?
Well, I wanted to second, and now I can't remember who was saying this, that you were going to stream the General Assembly into your fellowship so people could actually view it. And I'm sorry, who said that?
I think that was David.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you. David, yeah. What a wonderful idea. You could take about any 30 minutes of last May's General Assembly and show it to the people in your congregation, and their jaws would drop. You know, their jaws would drop at the elaborate land acknowledgments. You know, we stand on the land that's been stolen from the Indians, blah, 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 blah. Which in many cases is not true, by the way. People just conflate the outrageous behavior of the US government in the 19th century with earlier behavior, 200 years earlier. And the elaborate descriptions people were describing. My name is so-and-so, and I have gray hair, and I'm wearing this kind of blouse. This is what they're doing is they're claiming to be compassionate to the blind people, you know. And every single person who spoke did this. And there was the phrase, dismantle our white supremacy culture, uttered at least once every 10 minutes. And any 30 minutes of General Assembly in May would appall the average person. And I think that's a wonderful idea, David.
Craig Morrow.
Thanks. Here's a prediction or a hope and kind of a hope is that older leaders, voters, and others are going to say this year, yeah, we don't have video game reflexes, and that's a good thing, especially in a world that is now pretty much all reflex.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Richard.
No. Mike is first.
Mike Slocum.
Thanks, Richard and Jack. Nice to see all of you. Sorry for signing in late like I did. I had some computer issues at my end. I don't know if I have any predictions. I have more questions than I do have predictions, and I'd love to get other people's perspective on this. But after the GA happens this next June, after seeing what I saw as a voting virtual delegate this last June, in June of 2023, I'm kind of horrified as to what's going to happen this June. I'm not going to be a delegate. I can't possibly sit through 5 more days of misery like I did last summer. And what I would like to know is from some of you, if any of you have an opinion. So the 7 principles are obviously going to go down. Now, what all of you think is going to happen when that happens? Are they going to start dictating to us like Salt Lake City dictates to Mormon churches around the country? Are they going to start dictating like the Vatican does to Catholic churches all over the world? I mean, what's going to happen at that point? Because I'm worried about it, and I'm getting a lot of pushback from the congregation that I belong to, that I'm a board member in, and that they say, "Oh no, we're Unitarians. That stuff's never going to happen." And I was the only one still in the church because our minister, she was a delegate as well, but she was on the other side of the coin, and she had a opposite point of view, and she left, so she's not around anymore. But they're saying, "Oh no, that'll never happen. We're Unitarians. This is a free church." And I said, "No, we're going to have to do something to protect our little free church," and that's what we call ourselves. We call ourselves the Free Church Unitarian of Blaine. And they have in the past always operated as free church, but they're being very complacent and comfortable, and you know, they're acting like the German people act in the 1930s when the Nazis were slowly taking over. I hate to compare it to that, but that's kind of what I'm seeing here. And I think that they are going to see to it that the 7 principles go down, and then what's going to happen then when they do, you know? Anyway, that's just my question, not necessarily a prediction. I don't know what my predictions are, and I go along with what Nancy said and a few of the other people that, yeah, the people are going to be leaving their respective Unitarian congregation in droves, but they already have been doing that. So anyway, that's all I have. Thanks for having me.
Matthew.
I was just waiting for someone to recognize me.
Oh, that guy with the beard, that's Matthew.
I know him anywhere. Yes, thanks, Jack. That was good. Um, uh, I guess I have a more hopeful outlook on many things. I believe that our democracy will survive in our national politics, and I'd like to believe that the religious resistance, as I collectively call us, will be able to garner that 34% no vote to defeat this proposal. And I would just offer Mike a bit of hope, given that it's essentially an up or down vote. And they use the virtual platform where they keep it open until 10 o'clock at night. You don't have to pay attention to a damn minute of any of this. Just vote no. Because there's really going to be no substantive debate. Oh, I'm sure there'll be lots of talking, but you just go and so like my home church here in Wayland, oh, they're having all kinds of meetings and all that, blah, 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 blah. And in the end, we're going to vote a full slate of no delegates. This is one of the few times that you can do such a thing, because any amendments that pass will be entirely at the behest of the UUA and not really changing anything substantive. Your church is either going to say we support this change or we don't. I'm working hard at my church to help counteract the propagandizing of our churches. And I know I've contacted you. I hope you got my email, right? That we do this. But I would encourage, get a full slate to vote no. Every time you meet someone from another church, give them the means to help the church see what's going on. We love Unitarian Universalism. My loyalty is not to the 7 principles by every word. I would like for us to include love, but the kind of love that the UUA is preaching is not what you and I mean by that. Other quick predictions. Even if we do defeat it, I expect the UUA to roll ahead anyway on some pretext. To them, our churches are the Sudetenland, to continue the Nazi analogy for those who love their history. And that's probably, I shouldn't have said that, but I did. However, my hope and my expectation is the North American Unitarian Association, which I like to pronounce as NAWA, although that's not universally accepted, will rush in to fill the gap. And the most important thing is to give the ministry a safe haven to avoid the wrath of the UUA for their apostasy by saying we still want liberal religion, not a return to a puritanistic form of it. I find that very hopeful. And it's through the good work of organizations like NAWA and this one, UMIAC, and Fifth Principle Project, and Save the 7 Principles, and the intercongregational listserv and all that. And so to me, at worst, what we'll do is jettison the name Unitarian Universalist, but not the liberal religious values that we hold dear. And I think that's all I need to say. Thanks.
Bobby.
This is mainly in response to Mike. Ellen and Marie and I share a congregation, and it's a congregation that also doesn't believe that the UUA will do anything bad or that it will do anything to impact us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One thing they have done that I've been able to use to shake a few people up is that when, and maybe many of you know this already, but when churches had to submit information to become certified at the beginning of the year, churches had to say how many BIPOCs were members of the congregation. So now on our membership list, there is a column indicating whether or not you are BIPOC. And you can't imagine how many people are upset with that. So my hope is that people will slowly begin to understand what's going on.
Bobby, could you define BIPOC for us, please?
Black, Indigenous, people of color.
Thanks.
And I've had people who, if it were up to me to put whether you were BIPOC or not, I would definitely have checked off. Say to me, I'm not BIPOC. So I'm thinking, this is interesting. So I did suggest that when we have guests, we put on the welcome card, are you BIPOC or not? I did that, of course, with tongue in cheek, and people got very upset with me.
Marie? You're muted, Marie.
I'm going to tell you what Marie might not say. She is in the hospital, and she has been there since a week ago, Tuesday. And she's on her phone, which doesn't always work, but there she is.
Okay. Someone asked about what may happen. I would suggest that you read The Circle of Change. Is that the name of the book that they put out?
Widening the circle of
Widen the Circle of Change.
Of concern. Yeah.
Of concern. It lays out exactly what seems to be happening now in some of the congregations. One of the things that we all were concerned about is having a blue being the arbitrary of whatever, whenever there is a problem. And when someone is accountable, they find you accountable, that they throw you out. I mean, actually, that's what I think is going to happen. If you read that book, you have some idea of what they intend to do. Thanks.
The Board of Trustees seems to consider itself accountable to Blue, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. Isn't that interesting? So who's really running our national organization? Is it really Is it really the Board of Trustees? I'm not sure it is.
I put a link to how you can download Widening the Circle of Concern in the chat.
Okay.
Ellen?
Hi, I guess I think I'm maybe a pessimist, and I kind of think, well, I'm pretty sure like I think Mike said, the 7 principles are going down, but it's not clear to me what happens after that, and so even though I think that's going to happen, I kind of hope that will start a rebellion. And if it doesn't, then we have UMIAC, we have NAUA, and so that's kind of what I call the refugia, where we will survive until this passes. And so far as the national scene, I think it's a mess, but it's an interesting mess, and unfortunately, I'm living in interesting times. Yeah, but and once again, it's like, okay, it might be bad, but there's a lot of people out here that once we see what happens are going to be mad, and So then maybe something good will happen.
Mhm.
So predicting the worst and hoping for the best, and even if the best doesn't happen, I want to be part of the resistance. Okay, that's it for me. How do I turn this off?
Mhm. 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 Wesley?
Wesley, did you have something to say?
Yeah.
I'm getting there. I have a prediction about that they have set up at least one of the committees of inquisition. The board has approved it and so forth. It exists from the widening the circle. Although I hazard the prediction, they're going to have a difficulty in finding enough people to go out and enforce it. You see, this is what has been happening all over the place. You know, we would like a minister, we would like an interim minister and so forth. Well, we're sorry, we just don't have any. And I predict as a consequence beyond the inspectors, I predict there may be a shortage of them too. That there will be an increasing number of churches that don't have UU ministers, but they take on board, as they have at least in one case here. And I believe King's Chapel even has someone who is technically not a UU minister. Now that may be incorrect. You think it's true?
I do, yeah.
Well, if King's Chapel doesn't have a UU minister, I'm not sure where anybody's going to find one. You see, I think that there will be a number of people, for example, who are escaping Methodists and so forth, that we can stand by to take on survivors, perhaps. But I think that I think it's a safe prediction that more congregations will be taking people who are liberal and probably well trained, but not UU in more churches. I think that's a safe prediction,
Mhm.
but we'll see.
Mhm.
But otherwise, the shortage will also probably lead to poor inspection because there won't be enough inspectors. I
Mhm.
mean, I have difficulty finding a mechanic, let alone a minister out here. So I think that those are possible predictions anyway.
Mhm. Candy.
Well, I'm going to predict that my little church here in Tampa is going to thrive. We have been gaining members every week. And part of it is because we couldn't find a Unitarian Universalist minister, and we hired a retired Methodist minister who is gay, has had to spend his entire life as a Methodist minister denying his gayness, and now he is in love with Unitarian Universalism and the freedom and the liberal, and he's just gung-ho. And my little church is just doing just fine.
Yeah. David?
So I wanted to respond to Wesley's comments regarding ministers or lack of ministers. Yeah, it's a tough job anyhow, but when you don't have a postgraduate program that really preps people the way they should to deal with the wide skill sets that ministers need, they're going to burn out and not stick in many places. But the other thing that I'm concerned about is that the UUA will send out ministers from other faiths than that, saying they're similar because they're congregation. And it's another way to sabotage and distract fellowships from their purpose. And I can think of an analogy to this in naval warfare back in the 1800s. The European powers would capture a ship and then set it on fire and send it sailing into the opposing people's blockade to catch their ships on fire. And I think so when you have some of these ministers come in, they're Pentecostal and they're just in a different world. They're trying to do their best at their job, but it's not a good fit for the UU. And I think the UUA folks know that. That's a form of sabotage as I see it. Thank you.
Our little church here in Northwest Wisconsin has 35 members, and only 25 show up at any one Sunday, and some of those are on Zoom because they would travel 50 miles to get to church. We don't have a minister. We have a liberal chaplain who comes one Sunday. We have a minister from New England, and we have a minister from Milwaukee, and a minister, and we have lay-led programs. And we're worried. We're all older, gray-haired, older, and we don't want to lose our congregation.
Ellen?
I don't know if it's okay to ask a question, but I would like to ask Wesley. Oh, he said that they already have some kind of a committee, like an accountability committee or something, and I just wondered if he could give us some details.
The details are in the widening the circle.
Oh.
And
yeah,
notice that there was a report that they had activated this committee, but I have no news because they don't seem to have done anything, or at least I haven't heard about them doing anything yet. They may or may not. I have no idea. That you would have to look in the widening the circle and look it up. I would have to do that tonight because I don't remember what the name of the committees are. What I do know is that there are supposed to be 2 of them, and they have activated 1. Now, I don't know. I think the second one is the one that's supposed to go out and inspect congregations, but maybe they can't find any members to put on it. Maybe that's the problem. I honestly, that's a wild guess, but I don't have any other answer for you. All I know is that they put those 2 committees in the book, and they said that they had activated 1 of them, but then there's dead silence. Just like Black Lives UU has bought 8 lots. You know, I know that they've done that and that they got an $833,000 grant from the city of Minneapolis. But that was supposed to have happened a year ago, and I haven't heard any more, so I don't know whether they've actually done anything. This is just an analogy. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gone into that analogy, but there's dead silence. You know, I don't know. I can't answer the question that you put up because there's silence, and I haven't heard of any more churches getting into fights lately. I mean, I suppose somebody is, because that's a kind of long-standing history of scrappiness. But I don't know any more that's happened. They created the committee, and there was supposed to be a second committee, but that committee hasn't been approved or something. There's only one that's been approved, but I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, I do know one thing, that I've had reports that some of the things, like CLF has stopped sending out sermons because they don't have money to do it, they say. I'm simply reporting what they said. I don't know if they're doing it again. They stopped, and that the local social justice thing in Minnesota, Moose Jaw, has also reported some financial difficulty, or it did. But beyond that, I don't know. See, I don't know. I do know about 2 local congregations, and one of them has deeded its property, has been deeded for a long time. Well, if it dissolves, which I don't think it will for quite a while, it has deeded its property to the cemetery. And so the church will become the cemetery chapel, and it will continue on that way. The other congregation that I know about most immediately said that they believe they're completely independent, that they haven't deeded anything, as far as I know. They said they haven't deeded anything to the UUA, so there's nothing to get, and so forth. But I don't know any more than those things I relayed to you.
Thanks.
Mike?
Thanks, Jack. I can definitely relate to what Valerie just said. We have about the same size church that she does. We have about 35 to 40 somewhat regular people, but on any given Sunday, we're going to see, 18 to 25 actually sitting in the pews. And we're looking for a minister now, not that hard because we know there aren't many out there. And there's another fellow board member, a transgender lady that she was way ahead of me. I was trying to figure out how in the hell I'm going to tell the rest of the people in the congregation, hey, we're going to have to step outside of the UUA pipeline, if you will, because there's none of them out there. I'm on this committee to help for the ministerial search committee with her. She's the chairman of it. And she was way ahead of me, and she says, oh, no, we're going to have to hire somebody that's not a Unitarian. And I'd love to hear more about Candy's experience down in Tampa, because we would love to hire some former Methodist that happens to be gay or whatever, somebody that's an actual liberal, and they no longer felt welcome in their old church tradition. But I don't know, and I'm worried about modifying our own bylaws. I found out about a month ago or 6 weeks ago that we were one of those churches that if we disband or if we were to leave the UUA and say join the NAUA or go off on our own or whatever, that there's this one codicil in our bylaws that then the church property is turned over to the UUA. right? And I had heard about this with other churches around the country. And then I saw that I finally looked at our own bylaws, and guess what? It's right there. And then I suggested, well, we need to change that. And the excuse used for that being in our bylaws is because it furthers the cause of liberal religion. And I've been trying to tell them ever since my experience last year with GA that, well, the UUA does not practice liberal religion anymore. So therefore, they don't deserve this property that's worth God knows how much. Where the church property is, it's probably worth $1 million, you know, and that's going to be turned over to the UUA. And then I've asked my fellow board members and congregational members, and they think I'm some sort of, I don't know, some sort of obnoxious loudmouth. And I said, okay, we give them $3,000 a year. That's our, based on our membership, that's our annual dues. And I said, what do we get back in return for that? Anything? We get the 7 principles taken away from us. Is that what we're going to get here in the future? I'd love to know that. And they say, well, we get to apply for grants or we get to apply for loans. And I'm going, well, anybody can apply for anything. Do we actually get money from them? I don't, you know. And they said, well, geez, Mike, is that what this is all about, is just money? And I said, no, but that's a symbol of how they're taking advantage of us or taking us for granted. You know, and I saw so many, I got 30 pages of very negative notes, handwritten notes that I took as a delegate sitting through all this stuff last year at GA. But anyway, that's all I have.
I guess that means I'm next. What I would just quickly say in response to a couple things, what we're seeing happening, and I know there's a couple people I know from previous meetings here can report personal experiences with this, where our churches are slowly starting to develop what's called right relations committees to enforce a particular Orthodox conception of covenant. And the charge is you are out of covenant because someone has reported you for being hurtful. And, you know, to me, the analogy is like a star chamber or the crucible. And this is not liberal religion. And I think it's all too human to have trouble believing that such things can be happening. And I would say, as an illustration of this, I have been meeting regularly with a fellow here at the church in Wayland. And he said, we've been talking for 2 years and you've been saying it this whole time and I didn't believe you, but I've now come to believe that our church is under existential threat from the UUA. Took 2 years. So we got to get started, but there's a process within liberal religion as to how to move opinion. And you don't do it by beating people over the head. And so it does take time. Right now, we, you know, as a show of good faith, we have to try to defeat this current effort, which will give us a little more time. But I do agree. And here again, I cannot offer concrete proof. I'm just reading the tea leaves here. This would fall under a prediction, though. Look for them to start moving more aggressively to seize the assets, especially since when they continue to do this, it's already showing donations are down. So they're going to try and grab it another way. And so I appreciate Mike saying, oh, you better look at your charter and fix it before it's too late. An ounce of prevention and all that. And again, I don't fault anyone for finding this hard to believe, but some of us have to very gently start introducing these ideas. And I laud you for saying, well, look here. And that's why I'm trying to purvey this thing, in particular, that clip where our new UUA president, Sophia Betancourt, said covenant without consequences isn't covenant. And then when I went further into it, she says, love means you got to come right. You got to come right. So love is not necessarily the spirit of this church anymore. And with that, I yield back. Nancy, it looks like you're next.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to echo a bit what Matthew was saying. We just had a new right relations covenant, and I was the first one to be charged under it with what do you call it? Anyways, yeah, that I harmed people, and I had disruptive behavior because I objected to a trans flag being posted in the social hall. And yeah, so it just made it real clear to me I don't belong there anymore. And our church has like our minister, we have ranges of 250 to 450 members. So in other words, nobody knows how many members we actually have. I don't think they really want to check. I'll be real curious to find out about our pledge drive of how many people actually pledge. But yeah, this whole thing of right relations committee is set up to get rid of people who disagree. And so I'm the first case here in my church.
Mhm. Mhm.
Looks like Candy's up.
Mhm.
Candy, you're muted.
I hit the wrong button. I'm sorry. I put it in the chat in case anybody wants to know. We went to indeed.com and we wrote up what we were looking for in a minister, and we sent it out, and we got like 40 or so applicants.
Mhm.
Now, granted, 38 of them wanted to come save our souls, so they really didn't understand what we were asking for. But we did get a liberal rabbi, a Baptist, retired Baptist, and a retired Methodist minister. And anyway, we chose the Methodist minister, and it's not perfect, but he's really inspired our congregation, and he really talks about Unitarian Universalism and goes back into the history and talking about the things that Unitarian Universalists have done over the years and how proud he is. This is the first church he's ever been able to join, and he's so excited to be a member of this church, and is just, I remember when I first became a Unitarian, I remember how excited I was about this new thing I found. And that's the way our minister is. He's so excited about it. And I like that. But try indeed.com. We did not get this through the through the UUA. We went out on our own. We did have to change our bylaws, because our bylaws used to say it had to be a UU minister. And we changed the bylaws to say we could have a contract minister that was not a UU minister. So this man is a contract minister. And I've told him to go to the NAUA ministers organization and see if that would be a fit for him. And I guess that's all I have to say, unless anybody has any other questions.
Bobby?
It may not surprise you to hear that Finley was the first target of our right relations committee. This was 3 or 4 years ago. And one of his sins, of course, was putting forward multiracial unity as one of the ways to attack racism.
And I would add, I was fortunate enough to join UMIAC while Finley was still with us. And his story was, he was Southern Baptist. And I remember him telling the story, oh, we're looking for multiracial unity. He goes to the white Baptist church there, and they say, we don't want your kind here. Why don't you go down the street to those heathen Unitarians? And Finley never stopped calling himself a Baptist, but he communed with us and preached with us when he could, although he got banned from preaching in his own church. But there's a long history of people coming into ministry in Unitarianism. I can't speak as authoritatively on Universalism, from other denominations. and saying, we love this. This is really my spiritual home. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Well, I'm delighted that the topic provoked conversation after all. And I want to thank you all for the genuine sharing from your hearts. It's really been inspiring. And I wish you all the best. Now, for closing,
Wait, we move on to the offering.
yes, Richard has some words about.
Yeah, they teach us in seminary, no matter how much you monkey with the order of service, never omit the offering. And so, well, of course, we don't pass the plate, but we urge people to consider joining our organization. We're negative and we're positive. We're negative in that we're fighting what we believe is a stupid, meaning completely counterproductive racial justice ideology that has captured the minds of the national UU officials. We are opposed to that. It just makes racial relations worse. It is actually racist. If you think about this ideology, it is racist. We're just trying to say, look, to improve race relations have been consistently improving for 70 years. To continue that, all we need to do is live the 7 principles and keep an eye on the playbook of Dr. MLK Jr. We're really not saying anything very exciting here. And no less a person than Kerry Hall, the executive vice president of the UUA, said that we're just completely out of covenant and it's the word we completely contradict the real goals of the UUA. Well, if so, it makes you wonder, what are the real goals of the UUA? I mean, we're just about the 7 principles and the playbook of MLK, but apparently that's not acceptable. Well, anyway, that's the negative part of us. The positive part of us is, of course, we want to promote. We want to stop these fools from making race relations worse with their stupid ideology and go back to proceeding in positive ways. So we urge you to at least think about joining us. Thank you.
Our service now is ending. Oops. As we extinguish the chalice, symbol of our faith, we recall the words of the late Reverend Elizabeth Sully Jones. Now we extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now, after the postlude, the floor is open for any more conversation that you wish. Please use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you wish to be called on. And we'll keep recording to make the conversation more interesting to the latecomers who view it online. So if you don't want to be recorded, don't talk. And now,
or if you don't want to be recorded, just say so, and I'll pause the recording while you're speaking.
Very good. I like that, Richard. Thank you. And now I'm going to play the closing hymn.
And an emotional support pet. Well, a service animal has to go through long and expensive.
Well, I don't know what happened to it. I had it queued up. Let me see if I can find it. Give me just a sec.
Maybe click on the replay button here in the corner.
Oh, I've got it. Here we go.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
I'm sorry, I'm unable to raise my hand.
Okay, go ahead, Marie.
I understand that Blue is building a housing complex for the homeless. And I wonder if it's just going to be for BIPOC. And I thought about it and I thought, that's against the Fair Housing Act. I mean, you cannot discriminate against people regarding where they stay. But I, like I said, I don't know. I haven't looked into it. I just know that they are supposedly building a housing complex for the homeless in Minneapolis. Thank you.
Mike Slocum, I've left you a message in the chat.
Mute. Sorry, Jack, I'm muted. I think I just put my email in the chat.
Thanks. I see it. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Anybody else? Who's next? Bobby, did I see your hand?
Yes, please. We are at our church trying to do some education around the situation in Palestine. And I was very interested to see the statement that came out from the UUA. Actually, it came out on Valentine's Day. And it's a very strident statement calling sort of for unconditional ceasefire. And I've been kind of surprised to see how strongly the UUA has come out in support of Palestine, because one of my experiences at GA has been difficulty getting any actions of immediate witness through, because the sort of Zionist supporters opposed it. So I finally realized today part of what's going on is that Black Lives Matter has been very supportive of Israel against, I'm sorry, supportive of Palestine against Israel. The statement, to my mind, is still a fairly good statement, but understanding that has sort of removed my puzzlement as to how this has happened in the UUA now. I think it's the influence of Blue, etc., over the executive part of the UUA. And I wonder if anybody else has had experience. We're going to be using the UUs for Justice in the Middle East curriculum on looking at the situation in Palestine through the lens of the 7 principles. And one of the reasons I really latched onto that was to educate people more about the 7 principles, given their vulnerability at this point in time.
Interesting.
Mike?
Thanks for calling me out, and thanks for that comment, Bobby. I was really bothered by what Sophia Bettencourt, her statement about the war in the Middle East. That bothered me a great deal, because I thought, and at first I thought maybe I was just being too unfair and I was too quick to, because I don't like her at all. I wanted to go into last year's GA as a delegate. I wanted to like her, and I watched a bunch of the town halls that she had around the country, and the more I listened to her, the less I liked her. And then when I was told during GA that if you vote against her, the one candidate, that means that you're either racist or sexist or both, right? And that's what was said up on stage to all of us, all of the in-person delegates and all of us virtual delegates. And I said, well, I'd already decided I was going to vote against her. I was going to vote no. But if I hadn't had decided that, I would have done it at that point. I would have decided to do it at that point, because I'm going, okay, well, it was a minister from the town I lived in when I was in junior high, Rockford, Illinois, and he said this as a white male himself, and I said I couldn't believe it. I'm thinking, okay, well, whatever. So I was one of 110 out of about 2,500 that voted against her. So I'm sure I have a target on my back at this point, but if they bothered to do that. But my point is that when she made the statement about the Middle East war, and I was thinking, well, I grew up with a fair number of Jewish people around in a suburb of Minneapolis, actually. I know there's some Minnesota people here on this call. And I said, maybe it's just my sensitivity because of the people I grew up in, and I knew grandparents that had the numbers etched in their forearm from being in the concentration camp and all of that. And I realized that they're just running roughshod over us, and I'm going, who do these people think they are? You know, when they use the term we covenant. Now, whenever I hear that, we covenant, I'm thinking to myself, and this sounds a little impolite and disrespectful, but when somebody else uses that we covenant, I'm saying, well, who's the we? Do you have a mouse in your pocket or what? You don't speak for me. Okay, I don't covenant to anything. the reason why I'm still going to the little white church in Blaine, Washington, is because I was operated as a free church. So you don't speak for me. There's no we here. Okay. There's a we only if I get a say. Okay. And if you look at the statement on the UUA website from Betancourt, it was this, she was just assuming that anybody in their right mind couldn't possibly disagree with me. And I'm saying, well, no. And the statement was in effect blaming the Israelis for being attacked. Okay, blaming the fact that they murdered babies and they raped Israeli women because they're just what, Israelis? And I'm going, is this in some bizarro world that we live in now? But anyway, I don't know. I feel like we're living through, I don't know, Jim Crow in reverse. You know, I feel like, okay, if you're a straight white male and you want to be an active Unitarian or an active Democrat or something like that, you damn well better keep your mouth shut. Okay. And that's what I'm hearing. And I'm, you know, and then if I were to say that out loud, then of course I'd be accused of being a racist. But I used to train, I was an equal opportunity trainer and an equal opportunity rep when I was in the Navy. I was in the Navy for a long time, and we used to teach color blindness and we used to teach gender blindness. And you didn't treat everybody the same, but you treated everybody equally. And I absolutely positively believe in old-fashioned equal opportunity and old-fashioned equality. And we all start on the same starting point. And I float tested that in the chat in GA last year, and I got pounced in about 10 minutes. I got pounced on by 14 people, basically accusing me of being racist because I still, after all this time, still believed in the color blindness and gender blindness that I used to train people in the military, and that's one of the only things that works, you know. But anyway, I'm done. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk, Mike. I grew up in Rockford and then moved to Minneapolis.
Oh, I'll be darned. I moved from Minneapolis to Rockford. My mom got homesick. My dad's job didn't work out too well, so we went straight back to the Twin Cities, actually. So, yeah, we should talk. Look up my email. I'd love to hear from you.
Were you there in Rockford, Mike, when Tony Perino was minister?
Tony what?
Tony Perino.
No, I heard that name. I think his name, David. He's still on the call. He knows.
Oh, David.
He knows.
Weiss,
I think his name is Marshall Johnson. I think it's Marshall Johnson or something. He's at the church in Rockford, and I mean, when I was there, I was there for the last half of 7th grade and the first half of 8th grade, and we moved back to Minnesota, basically. So, yeah. And so that was, you know, I was 14, 15 years old or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious. Well,
Yeah.
I want to say thank you for speaking up. I'm a, you know, what we sometimes call a Unitarian. I'm Jewish, and I
Okay.
joined a Unitarian church 50, oh my God, Richard, 51 years ago.
Wow.
And,
that's a long time.
at the time, I thought I was going to be a rabbi. I had transferred to the University of Cincinnati. I lived in the sisterhood dormitory at the Hebrew Union College. And I tell my friends a funny thing happened on the way to the synagogue. I found the Unitarian church and I loved it. I thought, boy, this is how to do religion. Well, like you, Mike, I've been very disillusioned recently by the developments nationally. There was a minister years ago in Indianapolis, and by God, Richard, I'm blocking on his name, but I'll bet you remember it. He was the guy who was opposed to Unitarian social action. Can you think of who I mean? Minister at the big Indianapolis.
Paul Beatty.
What?
That's Paul Beatty.
Paul Beatty.
Paul Beatty.
Yes, Paul H. Beatty. Thank you, Wesley. Yes. And when I came into Unitarians in my 20s, I was very gung-ho social action. I voted yes for all the social action resolutions. And I thought Paul Beatty was a wet blanket because he would warn that we ought not be taking positions on social issues will tear the denomination apart.
Mm.
And I thought, oh, what an old fogey. But now I think he was right, and not because I'm getting older, but because I've gained the wisdom that comes with getting older to see that Unitarians were attracted to the faith by a lot of different things, and mostly not for our social action resolutions. The people had a lot of different opinions politically and felt free to share them in church.
Mm.
That's not true anymore. Today,
Mm.
there's a party line, and if you don't follow it, you're at risk of being called harmful or being blacklisted or being thrown out. And it's happening to more and more people. And I am chagrined to see it. That's why I was happy to join personally the North American Unitarian Association, the new organization for Unitarians across the country and across the continent. And I think we're going to make our mark. I've been telling people that I think it's the future of Unitarianism. It's the future because it's the past.
Mm.
It's what we always have been. It's the seven principles and the right to have your own opinion and speak your mind and be thanked for it, not scolded. So I hope that that's the future that we can look forward to. I think the gang that's in charge now, including Ms. Betancourt, are phonies. She's certainly a lightweight theologically, and although she may have a doctoral degree, which anybody can get with enough persistence. And I don't know where they think they're taking us, but one of the predictions I wanted to ask people for was, what do you think our membership will be like in another year? Will we be larger or smaller as a denomination than we are right now? Will we have more congregations or fewer? Will we have more ministers or fewer? Will we have more members or fewer? And I shudder at the results because in our lifetime, Unitarians have been an important part of the liberal machinery that makes America function properly.
Mm.
In town after town, holding out for freedom of belief, for treating all people equally, for doing what's right. And I'm afraid we've turned away from that in favor of some ephemeral view of racial equality.
In absolute numbers, we are now smaller than we ever have been. When the UUA was created in 1961, the total number of adult members was slightly more than it is now. And of course, the population of the country has doubled since 1961. So as a percentage of the population, right, we're half the size we were in 1961.
And getting smaller by the day.
David had his hand up for a long time, but then he had to take a phone call. So maybe we should go to Ellen.
Okay. I think that we should be careful about how the UUA postures about the Middle East situation, by which I mean Gaza and Israel. I think that they are coming at it from a what I would call a woke position, similar to how they are coming at racism and gender ideology. And we may have some agreements about on certain, like there might be a sentence or a paragraph that we agree with, but I think it needs to be much more nuanced. I mean, I think that everybody should be much more nuanced about it and not so woke. I think the woke ideology is very dangerous, and we got to be careful. For example, it's one thing to say we need a ceasefire. Watching the numbers of dead, that it's easy to come to that conclusion. On the other hand, I think that people are losing sight of the evil of Hamas and where they are coming from. And so if any statements are crafted, they should lay the blame not just on Israel, but on Hamas. So I think it's, and also I do agree with Jack that, coming up with, making statements is, there's danger in that, although I don't know how to stop it. But I guess I'm laboring under, what do they call it? Cognitive, not bias, but cognitive
dissonance.
Because I grew up being taught very carefully by my mother about, to admire the Jewish people. And, she was ferocious that we must, like we would go by a Jewish neighborhood. We lived near Detroit. And she would be saying, well, now the Jewish people, they will build a school before they build a synagogue. And they are very active and responsible in civic, what you call engagement, and et cetera, et cetera. And all this was in our family, that was the highest praise. And I don't even know if it's true, but it's like the way it was received as a child was like, oh, so this, we must have this attitude, and it's too bad that we're not Jewish. So although I am horrified it's what's happening with the deaths, I'm also just want to make sure that we keep our wits about us and remember that it's, how this started, and didn't just start, it's been going on for really a long time. It's not, there's two sides to this. So that's okay, that's enough for me.
I gave a talk about Hosea Ballou at Murray Grove a few years ago, and in the audience was a member of the board of the UU Ministers Association, and he said, I can't respect Hosea Ballou because he wasn't involved in social justice. And I said to him, yes, he was, as a private citizen. He belonged to at least a couple of organizations. One was advocating for the end of capital punishment, one was for advocating for the end of slavery, but he didn't think it proper to do this as a minister or to do it in the church.
Well, may I try to shed a little light here? Ellen, I'm very moved by your testimony. Thank you. I not only grew up Jewish, but in my late 20s, I had a job with the American Jewish Committee. I was Midwest Regional Director for the American Jewish Committee, which is a prominent Jewish community relations organization, somewhat akin to the more famous ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, has a very similar agenda. The difference is that the lay people who support the American Jewish Committee are Republicans. It's the Republican Jewish organization. And which is kind of funny because most of the staff are liberal Democrats, but the people with the money are Republicans. And so I know a little bit about the organized Jewish community's positions on issues. And I'll tell you that the thing about Israel is this. Israel was founded as the liberal dream of Jews who believed that Jews would only be safe in the world if we had our own place where we were in charge and nobody could subjugate us or try to enslave us. The problem is that with the war for independence in 1948, about 750,000 Palestinian Arabs were chased out of their homes in what became Israel. And the official Jewish line was that they were invited to remain, but they chose to leave. And largely in response to Arab propaganda that the Jews would be chased into the sea in short order, which of course did not happen. I don't know. I wasn't there. I have no idea of the truth in those claims, but it's certainly true that 750,000 lost their homes and were forced out of their homes. Picture your own home, picture having to leave tomorrow with whatever you can carry in your hands and on your back. That's it. These people lost everything. And no attempt was ever made by the Israeli community to welcome them back. And this was the beginning. This was the original sin. This was the Palestinians, referred to that event as the Nakba, the catastrophe. And they refer to this war in Gaza as the second Nakba. They lost their land and they lost their future. And this is something that Israel has never put right, in spite of having a minority of people who want to see justice done for the Palestinians. But they're about as influential in Israel as the peace movement is here in the US. So you can imagine the degree of success that they achieved. Very little. My sister, Deb, I have two sisters out of three who have spent their adult lives in Israel and raised their children there, their whole adult lives. And my sister, Deb, has written a book that I highly recommend to you. It's available on Amazon for a few dollars. It's called No More Enemies. It's easy to remember because the initials of the title spell enemy. No more enemies. And Deb's thesis is that the peoples of the world should tell our governments to stop making enemies for us. We don't need any more enemies. The Russians don't need enemies in Ukraine, and Ukraine certainly doesn't need enemies in Russia. The Jews in Israel don't need enemies among the Arabs and vice versa. But until we get to the point where we have the gall to tell our governments, enough of this, cut it out. Why is the United States such a big backer, for example, of whatever Israel does? I'll tell you why. It's money. It's because the American military industrial complex makes a lot of money selling weapons to the Israelis and selling weapons to other peoples around the world. The US is the world's leading arms maker. We are a nation of munitions and war and death. And are we ever going to come to grips with what has been our true history and to change it? This last week, we voted against not one but 3 attempts to pass a ceasefire resolution in the Security Council. The lone nation voting no on the ceasefire resolutions, when there are more than 29,000 Palestinians who died in this terrible war. What does that accomplish? What is a third of them children? What does it accomplish when a 6-year-old is killed? Whom does that protect? I am just sick over what's going on. And the reason, Ellen, that a lot of this goes on is that Netanyahu, who is an evil man, and is likely to wind up in jail when his term as president ends, because he's been under indictment for criminal actions, which have been suspended in because of the war that's going on. So it's to his advantage to keep the war going as long as he can, because then he stays out of prison. This is a classic wag the dog story. The whole war is an effort to prolong Netanyahu's immunity from prosecution at the cost of thousands and thousands of lives, needless cost of lives. Of course, the Hamas are full of people who act like terrible people who will kill at a moment's notice. But after all, they feel like they're mostly young men, and they feel like they've spent their whole lives being persecuted by this large neighbor that won't give them their land back. So it's a very difficult and intractable situation, but it begins to end when we insist on not having enemies anymore and sitting down and negotiating. Whom do you negotiate with? Not your friends. You negotiate with your enemies. That's the way wars end. And it's time that this one ends, in my opinion.
I think that we have a history of what should be done when we reach an impasse like this. And that's mobilizing and getting millions of people out on the street. Because until we stop the United States from arming Israel, there'll continue to be genocide. That's what is actually happening. Right. Because as we know, this is the Biden administration. I mean, I know Biden is one person, but it's also the Democrats who's also voting against ceasefire. So, unless that happens, I doubt very seriously that happens, because there is no real peace movement going on. I mean, you see some people demonstrating, but there is no peace movement. And as long as there is no peace movement, they will continue, Israel will continue to slaughter Palestinians. Only thing I want to say, this is not against Israeli people. This is against what's actually the genocide that's going there. I mean, as Rich said, the people who are opposed to it are almost like the same people who are opposed to it now. But there are many more people in the United States that could demonstrate, I know, than in Israel. And as I said, there's no peace movement. Finley has always tried to get a peace movement going. And now we see what's happening.
Yep.
Time to wrap it up?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Just asking.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming. Remember next month, For those of you who are clergy, tomorrow's meeting of the NAUA Clergy Support Group.
Mhm.
And next month you can hear Matthew Shear preach. I
On
think
the
he's like-
arsenal of democracy.
The what?
The arsenal of
The
democracy.
arsenal of democracy.
Yeah.
Can let's see, how many are left? There are 7 of us left. Quick show of hands. How many believe that Biden will be reelected? Raise your hand if you think Biden will be reelected. 1, 2, 3. How many think Trump will be our next president? 1, 2. How many think it'll be somebody else? Nobody's going that route. Well, that's interesting. I wrote a post for Facebook the other day, and I said, I think Trump's going to win because the American electorate, taken as a whole, seldom passes up the opportunity to do something colossally stupid at the polls. And as evidence, I offer Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., Donald Trump. How much more evidence do you need? You know, when you see something that keeps happening, you have to say, hey, something's going on here. So we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Good night, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Goodbye.